Hi, I'm Christine, and today we're going to be working on some realistic sketching techniques. These are foundational techniques that you can use to draw any subject matter in a realistic style. And so today we're using an example of a bird, this robin, but these techniques can be applied to any subject you want to draw and be applied to drawing from either photographs or from real life, such as birds in your backyard. So whether you haven't drawn in decades or you've never picked up an art pencil, or whether you're an accomplished artist and you're just interested in seeing another artist's perspective on foundational drawing skills, you're in the right place. So whenever I begin a drawing, I first like to get used to my medium, and the way I will use my pencil is I will be very light and loose. And perhaps you can't even see the circle I'm drawing, but that is how loose I would be drawing. I am not pushing down at all on the pencil. I am being very loose, letting it glide over. And I will often use my fingertip and my palm and the pencil as sort of like a tripod to help to balance my drawing hand and let it go more freely. So that is the way I will use my medium. I like using a drawing pencil such as this that I can sharpen have a sharp point, and that I can also use on its side overhand style, in which I can easily lay down a lot of graphite to show shadowing or the illusion of various colors or values through just how hard or soft I am with the pencil. Okay, so that's the beginning, is I really just like to have you try to loosen up and go as light, as loose as you can. You're just tickling over the top of the paper. Okay, so that's warm up. Now let's look at our bird. And again, we're using a photograph of a bird, but this could be any subject, a person, a plant, a landscape, whatever you like, either as a photograph or looking at it in real life. These techniques apply to any. So the first thing I will do when I'm making a drawing is I will determine the size of the entire drawing, because you don't want to start drawing, say, this bird's head and make it this big and all of a sudden run out of room for the rest of the body. So I will make a line that represents pretty much the length to the width of what I'm drawing. And it's easy also if you are looking at a line that goes straight through your subject matter, such as this. And in this case, we're drawing the same size, essentially the same size. So I will draw an angle that pretty much represents this. And I use my pencil a lot in measuring, and we'll talk about that more in a few moments. Now I'm going to make this line very light. You might not even be able to see it. Okay, so that's my general posture line, and that's an angle. Okay. Then the next thing I do is I will look at the bulk of my subject. What shape is that and where is it? In this case, the bulk of my subject is the bird's, make sure this is in the right place, is the bird's general chest area, this oval shape. And so I will put that basically in the middle of my drawing. And again, I am trying to be as light and loose as I possibly can. We're not committing to anything. We're just starting to put a foundation down as if you were going to be building a foundation of a home. You want to get that down before you move on to building the walls, right? And what we're aiming for here is we're just trying to get the silhouette of the bird or whatever object we're drawing first. So just the basic external shape before we go into internal shapes or shadowing. But today's lesson is just about how to get the basic silhouette, how to observe. Alrighty, so we've got our body here, and we're building everything else from that. And I might want to measure the width versus the height. Okay, I see that it's kind of like an oval. It's a little higher. Okay, so I do that. Okay. Now from now on, we have our first shape. And so from now on, every shape we add after that, we are going to want to look at the relative size and position of that shape to the first one. And that's really where we start looking at relative proportions of parts of the body. So what is the proportion of the head to the body mass, and the tail to the body mass, and the legs to the body mass? So we're going to start looking now at relative proportions and shapes. So I'm going to add the head, and as a symbolic shape, it's kind of actually square. This robin has quite a square head. Okay, so we know we're going to have a square, but where are we going to put that in terms of where this first body mass is? Well, one way to place that is to look at the alignment of that head compared to the body. So if I were to, say, put my pencil in a vertical position, lining up with the front of the chest, I would see that the head is actually quite far back of that. And so I will want to do that. In fact, why don't we just leave that there to help you see, okay? So it's actually back here, right? It's more of a square back here. And how do I know how big to make that square? Well, again, I can use my pencil to measure. So I could do something like measuring the width of the head using this edge and this edge of my pencil where I'm putting my finger. And I could compare that to the width of the body mass. So that would be 1, 2, almost exactly half the width of the body mass. So here's where I'm going to really start making some commitments of relative shapes. Okay, so if I had this width, well, no, if I go like this and I go 1, 2, that looks about right. Okay, so I've got it placed in terms of the alignment to the front of the chest, and I have the size correct to the size of the chest. Alrighty. Now, so I'm going to continue around the rest of the bird in that same sort of way. Let me get rid of this line here. I suggest not doing a lot of erasing when you're beginning. You want to separate really your creation phase from your editing phase. Alrighty. So I'm going to continue around the rest of the bird, sharpening my pencil a bit, with those same concepts of looking at the basic symbolic shape of a part of the structure and the size of it relative to what I have already on here. Alrighty. So let's say we're going to add this whole tail portion on. Okay. So this is kind of like a triangle here. Okay. So how do we know how long to make that? Well, again, I can measure from the end of the body that we've already drawn to the end of the tail. It's this wide. And I can compare that to the rest of the body. So in a line like this. So I can see that it's a bit shorter than the body and a bit longer than the width of the body. Okay. So if we went like this, same idea, the length of the body, and yeah, that's about right. Okay, then that would go about there. Okay, like that. All right, so how do I know the angle to draw that tail? In fact, it looks like I've got the angle a little bit too much this way. So how do I ground truth that really? Well, there's a few different ways. First, I could line up the back of the body and see that oh, it's pretty straight, isn't it? So I can look at the alignment there. So I'm going to want to straighten things out a bit, and that's why we stay so loose. Okay, so we don't feel like we've made any sort of a commitment here. Now, this is a little closer, right? So you'll look at alignments like that, and you can also look at the angle of a structure compared to either the horizontal or the vertical. So if I were to make a horizontal line here, again, I could use my second pencil, and I could compare it, the horizontal line, to the angle of the tail. So that's maybe, what, 30 degrees perhaps? Okay, and so do we have about the same thing here? Pretty close. Okay, so all right. So we looked at that alignment there, and we looked at that angle there. Okay. Now I'll move on. I'm just going to stay very light and loose, like I said, everywhere. So we could add the wing. It's another major structure. And again, I could look at how wide the wing should be. I could tell by how wide it is compared to the whole body. So it's a little bit less than half of the whole body's width. Maybe like that. Maybe like that. Yeah. And also I could look at that same alignment. That's a little bit steeper angle, more like 45 degrees. I think we're close. Okay, so that's what we have approximately there. And how do I know how long to make that wing? It ends right there. Well, again, I could use the alignment of my pencil, and I could align the end of that wing with the body and see where I'm at here. So is it there? No, there, there, there. See, I think I'm pretty close. Pretty close. Again, we're staying really light, not making any commitments, and not doing a lot of erasing yet. Okay, this just comes about really slowly. Okay. Now let's move on. We can add that other wing. This is the bird's right wing. And we could look at that shape there. That's one way to draw it, is to look at that shape. It's a nice triangle there. Okay. And how do I know how big to make it? Well, again, if I use the alignment of my pencil, I can see that it lines up about the same as this front wing. And so it's going to be somewhere in this area, right? And how do we know where to place it? Well, there's a second concept that I can introduce here in terms of placing this triangular wing, is the fact that we have this shape here. Okay? This is a shape. This is a triangle as well. And this is what I would call a negative shape. What artists do, in fact, call a negative shape. And negative shapes can often help you placing structures on a drawing. So if I were to show you where that negative shape is, drawing that negative shape, in fact, could help me place where that wing is supposed to go. And so it's just about supposed to go around about right here. Just about there. And again, I could check my alignment of where that wing should be in terms of placing right here with lining up. Oh, let's see, I've switched my pencils here. If I line up where that wing ends, where it looks like it attaches to the body, that's exactly pretty much where the back of the neck is. So let's line up here and see if we've got that right. Oh, pretty close. Okay. So again, using your pencil either vertically or horizontally and comparing it to the structures of what you're drawing is very useful. And you can do that both when you're just looking at something in front of you, like a photograph, as well as if you're looking at like a robin on your lawn. You could do the same sort of thing. Okay, so let's move on. Let me get rid of this a bit here. Blue pencil doesn't erase quite so well. Let's get this shape a little closer here. Okay, so now let's add a leg. And we can see that the leg is just a little bit to the left of where this wing is. And how do I know how long to make it and at what angle? Well, again, I can use that idea of relative proportions and using my pencil as a measuring tool. So if I measured the entire width of the leg, I could compare it to a different structure in the body. I could try to find a structure that's about the same length, like the tail or the width of the upper chest, like that, like that, like that. Okay, so we're going to make it about that long. Now, when we're drawing something the exact same size, that's pretty easy. I could have just actually measured the length of this and brought it right on over here if I was going to do drawing from a photograph. So the concept of using relative proportions can apply whether you are drawing from a photograph or from real life. And it's especially useful when you're drawing something at a different size than it is in real life. So for example, if I were drawing an 8-inch tall bird, as a 1-inch tall gesture sketch, or if I was drawing a 100-foot tree on a 10-inch piece of paper, that's where really looking at these relative measurements helps. Okay, so we were talking about how long to make the leg and what angle to draw it, alrighty? And so we saw that the length of the leg was about the same width as the chest area here. Okay. And how do we know the angle? Again, we can use our pencil and we can see that it is almost vertical, just a teensy bit straight there. Okay, and so the bird actually has a little joint here, and then it goes down. It's a little bit, okay, like that. All right, and do a teensy bit of erasing there. Something's wrong here. So we see that the white of the, what is actually the bird's heel is lower than the wing. And here I have it higher, don't I? So got to change something here. It's probably a little bit of both. Maybe my first line was more correct with this wing. So that's why you just stay really light and loose when you're sketching. It's not a mistake to go back and modify your drawings, and that's why you stay so light, so it won't matter so much. Okay, yeah, kind of still going like this. Okay, there we go. Close enough for government work, as they say. Actually, he's a little, problem is he is actually a little bit fatter right here. That's what's going on. That's why that looks kind of funny, huh? Okay. All righty. Now, how do we, so we're gonna place the second leg the same way. Okay, so we're going to figure out where to place it by lining it up with the rest of the body, and it lines up with the back of the top of the head here, so about here. And again, there's the white heel area, be kind of like this, and the leg. And we notice that this leg is at a different angle than this one. Okay, it's just slightly off, I don't know what you'd call that, 60 degrees, 75 degrees. So it kind of goes over this way. And we can ground truth where we've placed that by looking at where it ends here. Again, aligning with the rest of the bird, kind of the front middle of the head. I guess it would have helped if we would have firmed up the head a bit, but yeah, close enough here. Okay, and these feet are hidden in the soil here, so we just won't worry about those right now. Okay. So I'm just continuing to go around the bird, kind of in a clockwise motion. And so we're moving up to working on the head. Okay, so again, it's all about relative proportions. I'm going to add the beak, and we want to know, we want to determine how long it is and at what angle it is. And again, if we use this alignment idea, I could align my pencil, and this is actually, what I would just be having one pencil in the field, but I would hold my pencil up and notice that the bill goes a little bit in front or to the left of where the front of the chest is. Okay, so that's going to be somewhere here. Okay. And using that idea again of alignment and angling, we can notice the bill opens at a bit of an angle. So it's not straight out, it's going up. Okay? And we can determine its size by comparing the length of the bill the yellow part of the bill, say to the rest of the head. It's almost half the width of the head. And so I'm just going to kind of guess it about here. And I can also line the bill up where it would open like that and kind of see if I'm close with where that imaginary line would come out of the back of the head. I think that's pretty close. And it's going out in front. Alrighty. And we notice that it goes into the head. So it's not like a triangle stuck on the front of the circle of the head. It actually goes into the head, especially since the bird is somewhat looking at us. Okay, so in this case, I'll just make the bill a little bit wider. Something to that effect. I haven't mentioned this yet, but whenever you're drawing something, you are going to constantly be referring back to your subject, whether it's a photograph or a bird or other animal in the wild that you're looking at out in nature. You're going to be definitely glancing back and forth from your subject to your sketch and your subject to your sketch. You don't want to spend too much time looking at either one. You want to look at one part, like this bill, and then try to draw it, and the next part, like the eye, and try to draw it, and so on. Okay, so constantly glancing back and forth, what I would call ground truthing. Okay, so now let's look back here now at the head, working on the head, looking at the shape of the head. It's got a pretty flat head, doesn't it? And again, that's something I will look at here. A bit deeper there. I'll look at where the widest part of the head is, which is actually back here. So I had his neck a little bit too skinny. In fact, didn't I? Okay. All right, then we're going to add the eye. And so, again, we want to look at the relative size of that eye or its proportion compared to another part of the body. And in the case of birds, especially songbirds, often the height of the eye is similar to the height of the bill. So that's a good kind of general rule of thumb to start with. And then how do you place something like this circle within this greater square of the head? Well, what I do is I will look at that size and I will say to myself, how far is that size from the top of the head, the back of the head, and the back of the bill? And, you know, there's not a science to it. Just kind of going like this. So it's less than an eye's height from the head and more than the eye's width from the back. Okay. And I think that's pretty close. Okay. Now this isn't, of course, going to be perfect or as good as I could draw if I was sitting here by myself, because it is challenging to draw and talk at the same time. You're using both your right and your left brain. So I'll do the best I can here for you. Speaking of right and left brains, sometimes it's a little tricky to really shift into the right brain and get yourself to really focus in the moment and really look at your subject. So one of my favorite techniques for for training your mind to switch to the right side. This only works if you have a photograph, not a real organism. But I would turn my photograph upside down as well as my sketch. Okay? And helps if I line them up here a bit. Okay. So sometimes turning that around will really help you to see any problems you have in the structure. Remember, right now, the most important thing you want to do first is to establish the silhouette of your subject, as if it was the silhouette of a bird up on a telephone wire during the setting sun. You don't want to start working on too many details or internal structures before you have your silhouette correct, else you'll just be a little bit frustrated with the results. They won't quite be what you wanted. So then, this just is fun for me. I love doing this with my students. It really surprises them sometimes and surprises me as well for what I see at this point. And I usually will do this at about this point where I've got a little bit of everything here, but I haven't really firmed up or darkened any of my lines. So I still have lots of room to change. Okay, so I will just go around my subject, in this case is a bird, and just kind of look. Sometimes it just really helps to see things upside down, partly because it turns your left naming brain off to some extent and turns on your, artistic, especially right-sided brain that is really good at seeing shapes. So at this point, this can help me. I could just go around the bird in a clockwise motion. And, so I think I did see that I don't have a dip there, do I? So it's supposed to go a bit straighter. And again, if we line this up, we can see that there's just a little dip. Okay. So firming up that line. Noticing this close part of the tail is longer than that farther part of the tail. It's related to the concept of perspective, which we're not really tackling today. And here's a problem I've seen. So I've got this huge triangular negative shape in here, and I don't have it here. It's probably because my brain was just wanting to have a wing separate, because that's what we think about, is that a wing is on top of the bird and it's separate. And so I definitely had a problem there. And so I need to change the shape of my wing to some extent. Not too dramatically, but basically just more like this. Okay, something to that effect, right? More like that. Okay. Okay, so it's just amazing how that can help you, turning something upside down. And again, we can't do that when we're sketching live things, especially in the field. But it's just an exercise to help train your mind. It's something you can do, when you're warming up, just like an athlete could be warming up their muscles, or a dancer warming up. Looking at that negative shape again. This is a triangle here. So we have this shape a little bit closer now, don't we? Okay. Okay. So as I go around, here I see another triangular shape. Pretty close there. This triangle is a little bit different angle than this one, but I'm not going to worry about that at this point. But I do note that that is something that I could have seen before. Coming over here. Okay, some little feathery things here. Feathery things. This angle. This could have even been a little steeper angle, couldn't it? See, so it's amazing how you can see that. This is angled like this. And I had that too shallow, a bit too shallow. So something more akin to that. Okay. Going around. Nice big proud chest of the robin. Really accentuate that. And what else here? We're pretty close here. All right. Now we can turn them back over. Okay. So now we pretty much have the silhouette of the bird. Okay. So when I'm at this point is when I will start to do some erasing and some refining. I'll start to firm up these lines, give them some emphasis. And if I was going to go ahead and do a shaded pencil drawing, I could, start that at this point. But basically, these are the steps that I wanted to cover with you today. So again, just quickly reviewing. When you first get a pencil, especially a new pencil that you're using, practice with it. Going as light and loose as you can. Oh, I'm not even on the video here. Sorry. Where are we? Here. Pencil light and loose, hardly a commitment at all. Moving gently, just tickling that paper. Okay? Then determining the overall size that you're going to draw your subject. Then starting with some symbolic shapes that basically represent the main masses of your subject, like the oval here, the square here, the triangular wing, the sort of triangular rectangular tail, and making sure that your relative proportions are correct, like the body to the head and the tail to the body, by using your pencil as a measuring tool to compare various parts to each other. All right. And we are also using the pencil as an alignment tool to see where things line up. So like the chest is a little bit to the right of the end of the bill, and the back of the bird is pretty straight here. And the angle of the leg is at maybe a 60-degree angle. Okay? So 2 ways you can use your pencils. You're also going to want to notice the negative shapes. In fact, sometimes I have my students just draw the outside of an object and let the object appear within that negative shape. That's a fun exercise. So the negative shape here, these triangles between the wings, pretty much rectangle between the legs. Okay, so negative shapes. And we're always glancing back and forth, looking at a part and then drawing it, looking at a part and drawing it. And to double check our shapes, we can turn upside down and go around and see, because sometimes that does just open up a whole new pathway for us to be able to visualize that. And once we're pretty happy with this silhouette and the relative shapes and sizes of each part, then we could move on to adding color and three-dimensional form. Alrighty. Well, I hope this has been a good introduction to you to some foundational drawing skills that you can use to help you draw any subject realistically. So thank you so much, and I hope you learned something.